Let's go ahead and read Chapter 5. The house on Egypt Street became frantic with activity as the Tulane family prepared for their voyage to England. Edward possessed a small trunk, and Abeline packed it for him, filling it with his finest suits and several of his best hats, and 3 pairs of shoes, all so that he might cut a fine figure in London. Before she placed each outfit in the trunk, she displayed it to him. "Do you like this shirt with this suit?" she asked him. "Or, would you like to wear your black derby? You do look very handsome in it. Shall we pack it?" And then, finally, on a bright Saturday morning in May, Edward and Abeline and Mr. and Mrs. Tulane were all on board the ship. Standing at the railing, Pellegrina was at the dock. On her head, she wore a floppy hat strung around with flowers. She stared straight at Edward. Her dark eyes glowed. "Goodbye," Abeline shouted to her grandmother. "I love you." The ship pulled away from the dock. Pellegrina waved to Abeline. "Goodbye, ladies," she called. "Goodbye." Edward felt something damp in his ears. Abeline's tears, he supposed. He wished that she would not hold on to him so tight. To be clutched so fiercely often resulted in wrinkling his clothing. Finally, all of the people on land, including Pellegrina, disappeared. Edward, for one, was relieved to see the last of her. As was to be expected, Edward Tulane exacted much attention on board the ship. "What a singular rabbit," said an elderly lady with 3 strings of pearls wrapped around her neck. She bent down to look more closely at Edward. "Thank you," Abeline said. Several little girls on board gave Edward deep glances full of longing, and asked Abeline if they might hold him. "No," said Abeline. "I'm afraid that he's not the kind of rabbit who likes to be held by strangers." 2 young boys, brothers named Martin and Amos, took a particular interest in Edward. "What does he do?" Martin asked Abeline on their second day at the sea. He pointed at Edward, who was sitting on a deck chair with his long legs stretched out in front of him. "He doesn't do anything," said Abeline. "Does he wind up somewhere?" asked Amos. "No," said Abeline, "he doesn't wind up." "What's the point of him?" said Martin. "The point of him is that he's Edward," said Abeline. "That's not much of a point," said Amos. "It's not," agreed Martin. And then, after a long, thoughtful pause, he said, "I wouldn't let anybody dress me like that." "Me neither," said Amos. "Do his clothes come off?" asked Martin. "Of course they do," said Abeline. "He has many different outfits, and he has his own pajamas, too. They are made of silk." Edward, as usual, was disregarding this conversation. A breeze was blowing in off the sea, and a silk scarf wrapped around his neck billowed out behind him. On his head he wore a straw boater. The rabbit was thinking that he must look quite dashing. It came to a total surprise to him when he was grabbed off the deck chair, and first his scarf and then his jacket and pants were ripped from his body. Edward saw his pocket watch hit the deck of the ship and roll merrily onward towards Abeline's feet. "Look at him," said Martin. "He's even got underwear." He held Edward aloft so that Amos could see. "Take it off!" shouted Amos. "No!" screamed Abeline. Martin removed Edward's underwear. Edward was paying attention now. He was mortified, which is another word for embarrassed. He was completely naked except for the hat on his head, and the other passengers on board the ship were looking at him, directing curious and embarrassed glances his way. "Give him to me!" screamed Abeline. "He's mine!" "No," said Amos to Martin. "Give him to me!" He clapped his hands together and then held them open. "Toss him," he said. "Please," Abeline cried. "Don't throw him. He's made of china. He will break." Martin threw Edward, and Edward sailed naked through the air. Only a moment ago, the rabbit had thought about that being naked in front of the shipload of strangers was the worst thing that could ever happen to him. Oh, but he was so wrong. It was much worse to be tossed from the hands of one grubby, laughing boy to another. Almost caught Edward and held him up, displaying him triumphantly. "Throw him back!" called Martin. Almost raised his arm, but just as he was getting ready to throw Edward, Abeline tackled him, shoving her head into his stomach and upsetting the boy's aim. So it was that Edward did not go flying back into the dirty hands of Martin. Uh-oh. Instead, Edward Tulane went overboard. Yikes. Hi, third graders. Happy Friday. I miss you. I am excited to start this new 2.0 version of online education for you all. I'll be giving you more information on Monday about what that's going to look like for our class. It's going to be a little bit more structured, and there will be more specific lessons and days that I want you to get things done. I think the district will be letting you guys know some stuff over this weekend probably as well. I will probably be sending out a survey to your families to fill out about access to technology and other things that might be difficult for you during this time. Please encourage your families to fill out that form as soon as they can. It will help me help them as much as I can. All right, I miss you guys so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Have lots of fun. Play a ton, and maybe make something. That would be fun. Bye, third graders.